All right, we are here. This is Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet, and guess who is on location again? Captain Ron, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm in an undisclosed location, Tony.
I know. Well, I know you're not underground this time, so I see the sunlight behind you, so I think we're good. Well, we have a great show for you guys today. We have a returning guest. Yep. The last time he was here, he was talking about a account from 1957 that most people are like, what? I've never even heard this before. I didn't hear it. And so I'm glad you brought it to our attention. Stranger at the Pentagon, from 1957 to 1960, which is crazy. So I think we're going to touch on that just to get everybody back up to date. But you have a brand new book, actually a trilogy. Is it trilogy or just a series?
It's now a book series because it's 4 books in total, and there'll be 7 in total at the end.
Awesome. That's a quadrilogy, Tony.
Right. Well, this is Craig Campobasso, who is back with us. What are you doing? Look at you. He's back in studio. He's waving at his fans and audience.
Waving at all the fans.
Well, thank you for being here again. And so, first of all, I want to go back a little bit and just kind of update people about Stranger at the Pentagon. You started this.
Well, I met Dr. Frank Stranges, who wrote the book, which initially came out in '67. I met him in 2001. And I thought it was just going to be a fan lunch because, I had read the book and liked it. And through a whole course of circumstance, we became friends. And then at one point, me being in the business for a very long time, the entertainment business, as a casting director, he asked me if I would go with him to a meeting because there was a gentleman who wanted to make the book into a movie. And anyway, I went with him to the meeting, and I, just to help him, weed through it, because you know what it's like when you're not in the business, you have no clue. So,
and we see a lot of that.
We see a lot of that, and I checked him out online. There was really nothing. He had not produced anything before, so I called him, asked him for his credentials after our initial meeting, and he said he didn't have any, and that he only did business on a handshake. And I said, well, then you're not doing business with Dr. Frank. So then I had to tell Dr. Frank this. And, Stranger at the Pentagon is vignettes of stories. Throughout the times when Valiant Thor was here, Dr. Frank, meeting with him throughout the years, and various things that have happened. So I told Dr. Frank that it would be very difficult to write a script from this book, and then I found myself writing it.
And not even expecting to write it.
Not even expecting to, and so I sat with Dr. Frank for a couple of years and just listened to him telling me all different kinds of stories, and sometimes we'd be at lunch and something would come about, and so I sort of wove a lot of these things into it. And when I finished the first draft, which took about a year, I gave it to Frank, and he said he was going to give it to Valiant Thor. And then maybe a couple weeks later, he said, well, he doesn't read things, he just holds it and absorbs it. And he said to say, good job. And I said, what, no notes? Right? But the interesting thing is when I woke up the next morning, like the rings of Saturn, all the notes were spinning in my head. Oh, wow. And I literally just went to the computer and started doing that. So anyway, it's
Craig, tell us who Dr. Frank is.
Dr. Frank is many things. He was a minister. He was a ufologist, and his big thing was going around to churches and teaching about UFOs in the Bible.
Oh wow, how did that go over?
It went over very well,
even back then.
But in some cases, really bad, really poorly.
What I meant more is how does this guy have access to Valiant Thor, for example?
Well, the backstory is he was in Washington, D.C. He was doing a 2-week talk at a local church.
Right.
And one of those nights was UFOs and the Bible, and there was a high-level clearance secretary named Nancy Warren, whose name was changed in the book.
Right.
That's a fake name. And she actually went up to Dr. Frank that night and said, he wants to meet with you. Now, again, we have to backpedal. Dr. Frank got the picture of Valiant Thor that is very famous through a ufologist who was at Howard Menger's farm.
See if I can find it.
Yeah, and he took a bunch of pictures of him and the others that were with him, his vice commander Don, and a woman named Jill, a blonde woman. That's not Valiant Thor. That's somebody else who thinks that's Valiant Thor. That's actually
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'll keep looking.
There you go. See the 3 pictures up there at the top, right next to the guy with the circle.
That one?
Right there. There you go. That's the 3.
Oh wow!
Right.
I thought
there.
that. You know who I thought that was? Jimmy Stewart. When I first
Yeah,
looked at
a lot
it,
of people.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, a lot of people do think he looks like Jimmy Stewart. So anyway, when this retired Air Force photographer and ufologist, Augie Roberts, took these pictures, he took them for several reasons. Because Howard Menger was being visited by many human, different-looking beings from all over the universe who were coming here. And he and his wife would help to buy them clothes and... I remember stories about they would have to buy the women bras.
Yeah, right.
Which they
I had to buy Captain Ron one the other day. So
they weren't used to walking in high heels, etc. So there were always what they called visitors that were when he would have these UFO lectures at his farm in Highbridge, New Jersey.
Right.
So there was a secret handshake that Howard had with visitors to let him know that they were visitors when they came, and he had that handshake with Valiant Thor, so he knew that he was not from here, conveyed that information to August Roberts. But August Roberts also saw that he had no palm or fingerprints as well.
Wow.
And that he said when he looked at him, it was like an angelic being looking right through to his soul, who could read his entire soul history, and he knew it, and it was a very strange yet exhilarating feeling. So Dr. Frank then took that picture of Valiant Thor and he put it on his lecture board, and he had also George Adamski, some of the ships, and the artist's rendition of Orthon, who is also a being from Venus, right? Them living on the interior of the planet, not on the outside of the planet.
Right.
George Adamski or George Van Tassel?
No, George Adamski.
I see.
George Adamski.
What are your thoughts on him? Because a lot of people think he's sort of fraudulent.
On Adamski or Van Tassel? Well, I never really ventured that much into it, but he did have all the photographic evidence that we've seen a lot of with the Venusian ships and all of that. So, I mean, I really can't say one way or another, but Dr. Frank would talk about it, and he would have those photos up on the board. So when Nancy Warren approached him that night in church after his UFO lecture, she pointed to the picture of Valiant Thor and said, he wants to meet with you. And so they went into a private room, spoke. She said, I will pick you up at your hotel at 8 a.m. And then she brought him into the Pentagon, into a private room where he met with Valiant Thor. There's so much more to the story that it'll just take up too much time. But you can look it up on strangeratthepentagon.com. People want to know more about the story as well. So that's when he had his first meeting, and then his second meeting was in 1961 when Valiant Thor returned. So, and supposedly from what Dr. Frank said, Dr. Frank passed in 2008, that he is here for the long duration of the planet moving into becoming a fully conscious planet,
right,
where we're in duality now.
Is he alone, or is there
There's a whole complement,
Yeah.
a giant whole complement. He has vice commanders. There's Victor 1 spacecraft, which are 300 feet in diameter. I actually have the blueprints to it.
You do?
Which
Wow.
is amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we have, I have posters on the website where it shows the actual blueprints, the craft, and lists what all the rooms and everything are for. So it's a double decker, and each ship holds 200 people. So,
now, who would give you the blueprints to the spaceship that this guy flew here on?
He wrote them out from his conversations with him, and then had them drawn up. So I actually have
Dr. Frank did.
Dr. Frank did. So I actually have the big giant, white paper with the blue writing on it, and then subsequently, the smaller and more condensed versions. It's all fascinating. I mean, I
bet you when you were listening to the conversation, I mean, was you overwhelmed, or were you just more intrigued?
Well, I was intrigued, and I always, this is what I believe, being in Hollywood and listening to all kinds of stories that we all read, that we all hear. I liked this story from the beginning. I can't prove if it's true or not. All I'm doing is sharing what I learned from Dr. Frank and what I've learned from other people who have met Valiant Thor or had interaction with him. What their stories are and what they felt, and et cetera. But Frank really talked about him in such amazing terms. I mean, like he said, I never saw him smile until the 70s. He said, because his job was so serious.
Really?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, there are little tiny things like that.
Right.
And imagine if you were this created being from somewhere else coming, sort of overlooking a planet in its transformation of what's going on this planet.
It's not like I'm going to Disneyland or something.
Right. And being able to monitor everything.
Right.
Everything.
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty intense. And I don't think a human psyche
couldn't handle
that. So that's why beings of that class would have to handle it.
It kind of makes you feel a little better that they're here to help us and protect us, at least.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, if he's still here, other people should be interacting with him now, right?
There absolutely should be. I have not met them. The people that introduced me to Dr. Frank met him in the early 60s, and they were the ones who introduced me to Frank.
Right.
And they have both since passed on. They were quite elderly when I met them, a married couple. There are two other ladies separate of each other. One belonged to a UFO group, and Valiant Thor came and talked to them twice in 1 week, and we're teaching them and showing them certain things. And this woman said, it was so amazing because, again, when he looked at you,
it was just
you just knew that there was this angelic presence inside him. But she said he had a pheromone that she'd never experienced before, and it was like taking in peace and love and unconditionality. So. And the other lady, whose father worked for the military, was brought out to the desert to meet him. And these women were teenagers at the time. They were around 15, 16 years old, separate of each other. And she said the exact same thing. And she said also the thing about the pheromone, which led me to believe, here these two people know nothing, but they were describing the same thing.
Do you feel that, because he was, at the Pentagon with military politicians, do you feel that he's still in contact with military and politicians to this day, or do you feel like he's just more an observer now? Because, they definitely would have to still know that he exists, and or at least his.
Sure. There's lots of beings like that interact with our government and the governments of the world to help create. I have no proof of it.
Right.
My own inner sense tells me that he was there at the beginning stages of NASA.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he's still involved in it.
Right. Can you imagine the meeting with our current president? I couldn't even hear that conversation.
I don't know.
I know. Well, okay, so I mean, this is fascinating, and people can go to strangeratthepentagon.com.
Yes, and they can watch the short film there. They can
I've seen. I saw it at the movie theater. It was great.
Oh, wasn't that fun? Yeah, it was so fun. And they can get all of Dr. Frank's out-of-print books, including Stranger at the Pentagon, the posters, all that. They can watch the short film.
Why do you feel like he entrusted in you so much?
Well,
to carry that to give the message out to the world.
I think it was guided for me to meet him and to also do that because I was actually creating all these books, which were in the same sort of genre. But it comes from a spiritual understanding of the universe, not the nuts and bolts and all the things that people are looking for here. It comes from the heart base, right? Everything is coming from here to work for the betterment of mankind and universal kind, and so that the heart speaks through the mind. And then that's when humanity starts to become fully conscious, when they start working for the betterment of everyone else, and it's no longer a me thing, and they start looking really what we're here doing is we're working through our emotions, which are all attached to the 7 chakras, right? And all those emotions and everything we go through, and when people start to realize that I have to stop blaming other people and start owning up my own things, and they start working on themselves spiritually, they start doing that. And then what they start doing is they start activating 5 additional chakras above the head. And those chakras are the chakras that then, as you work on yourself, they move down into the body, and they go in between the other chakras, and then the 7 chakras actually merge into 1 chakra at the heart, and then we work from 2 chakras here and 2 chakras below the heart. So then we become fully conscious. So I always say, when people say, why don't they land on the White House lawn, is because they are actually helping us to catch up. And that's what the autobiography of the extraterrestrial books are about. It's about the whole program of raising consciousness on younger worlds. So that's the first book.
Yeah, what is the series? What is your first book?
So the first book is, the whole series is called The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga. And the first book is subtitled I Am Tehran. Tehran is a professor at the University of Melchizedek. It's in the Mira system, and there are 490 planets that are university planets. And everyone in the universe will go through these planets learning once they leave other planets that they're learning on. So every planet that people incarnate onto, they're going there to learn specific things. A lot of us are here learning duality. So this program, which is a starseed program, then is how that all works at the University of Melchizedek, how all these beings from not only this universe, but other universes and other super universes are coming here, because this planet is so unique in its dualistic diversity that they're pulling in the big guns from everywhere to bring forth the information. So do you remember in I think it was at the 70s or 80s, when Shirley MacLaine began the whole spiritual thing, and then all these other teachers rose up? I mean, if you look about where we were in a conscious state then to how far we've grown in a very short period of time.
Most people, they just thought they were crazy.
That's right. Yeah, and they made jokes and they had fun at their expense and all of that. But it's really done by leaps and bounds. So the next phase is to start bringing this into the mainstream and to start making motion pictures about it. So these books, of course, would be like similar to a Star Wars or a Star Trek because they're in the unknown universe. So the audience becomes the person who gets to learn about the universe, the inner workings of it, the hierarchy, the galactarian alignment of space peoples and planets, which is main focus is raising Earth up into universal society. Because Earth got cut off from the rest of the universe when it fell, and it no longer was fully conscious. So now
are we the lowly planet out there in the universe?
I wouldn't say the lowly planet. I mean, they don't look at anything like that. They look at everything that everyone is the same, even the created beings.
Right.
Say we're all the same. Some of us just have a little more schooling than others, which I think is a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And so,
and that to me, when it goes into spirituality, that's the reincarnations of human beings that come back because they still have a lot to learn.
Yes.
Kind of like grade 1, 2, 3,
that's
senior.
Right. And then we graduate from here, we go, and then we decide where we want to go next through Melchizedek. And then we go out from there and then into another planetary system, incarnate, and then learn from there. And then in those worlds, because they are fully conscious, those beings will live anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3,000 years. So then imagine all of the scope of what that entails. So if you were going to live, let's just say even 1,000 years, would you take just one mate?
Hell no.
No, dude. Well, because see, when you're looking at it from an unconditional love point of view, everyone wants everyone to be happy. They want them to feel loved. They want them to feel all of these things. And when we get to that much older level of our soul, what we're feeling is that we all have a whole bunch of soulmates. And
I agree with that.
If people come in and we want to interact with them, let's say if we wanted two souls and an older plane wanted to get married or vow themselves to one another, it's not a contract. They just vow themselves, but they make it clear if it's open, one might just be one might want monogamy and be okay with it, and the other one might want to have open, so they may have relationships with others, but that one person would feel joy for them because they're actually getting to experience love in many shapes and forms. The
unconditional.
That's right.
Craig, it's interesting you say the 1,000 year, 2,000, 3,000 years, because isn't Val Thor, doesn't he live 490 years or something like that?
He is actually immortal, so created beings can live forever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you want to?
I wouldn't want to, but here's the interesting thing about created beings is they can create a body at will that they want to be in, or they can
probably no aches and pains either.
Right,
so.
And if they go somewhere else, like let's say if he went to another world that looked different than us, would he create a body that looked like them so that they would feel comfortable with it?
Right.
Or other created beings as well. So, and then you just get into more and more because they can split offshoots of themselves and other things of that nature. I mean, I actually had a man contact me. He's in his 70s, and he had seen the Valiant Thor story. And he said, I've never told anybody but my wife, but when I was 17 years old, I wanted to know what life was all about. I wanted to know about the universe, and I wanted to know about everything. And then he said, I would then look up in the sky and see silver disc craft. And he said, and one day, a 5'8" blonde man who almost looked like he had Oriental eyes, but they were blue, came up to him and said, "We've been listening, and I'm here to answer all your questions." And he explained to him that he was a created being, and that he had created that body specifically because he knew that it's one that he would accept and not be in fear of.
Right.
And they had, I think it was 33 meetings in the course of 8 months.
Right.
And he taught him anything he wanted to know about the universe.
Now that would be interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
That one's interesting.
That's really fascinating. And I actually believed his story. I actually believed it because really all it was about his spiritual quest.
Right.
Right.
Right. It wasn't about solving the nuclear problems and everything. It was just it was more just a spiritual journey. Yeah. I always think it's funny, and it almost sounds like they're angels.
Yes, yeah, what we would call angels.
Call angels. But I think it's funny. It's always beautiful people. Why don't they pick people like pimples on their face? I mean, it's always these gorgeous.
You know why?
Yeah, why?
You know why? Because
more appealing.
They are in their soul perfection body. So what they are within, they are without.
Got it.
And that's really
the beautiful temple.
Really, it's the beautiful temple that they're in because the body really is a temple, and they look at it that way.
Okay.
You know, and
I just thought that was. I always said that every time they appear, they're always these gorgeous, blonde, blue eyes, and I that's another. It's. Do we also ever see minority looking, or is it always blonde, blue? Yes. Because I always hear a blonde, blue.
Yep. There's there's all kinds of colors of skin. There's violet. There's some that are rainbow washed.
Really?
And there are every different color any color you can think of. There are those skin colors out there.
Right.
And they gave me this wonderful metaphor once when I was talking about them in the first book, and they said, like the floral bouquet, we are the arrangement of God. Right? So we are all the colors of every beautiful flower. And it's just so interesting that here on our planet of diversity, that people fight over the color of somebody's skin. But I always said, no matter what color your skin, if you get a scratch, what color is it underneath?
White.
It's pink.
Or I guess it is pink.
It's pink, the color of love.
Yeah, true.
Right? So really, I just find it. I just find it fascinating.
Now, Dr. Frank, did he get to see any of your beginning stages of your series?
No.
Did you talk to him about it?
I talked to him maybe a little bit.
What did he say?
Well, he was very encouraging about it and all of that. Like the first book, I Am Tehran, came out on 11/11/11. And I did not plan it that way.
That's
it
pretty
just
cool.
Happened.
Right.
So he had already been gone for several years.
Right.
He had passed in 2008 in November.
And you were saying that writing these books were kind of you could say universe or divine intervention because. I mean,
well, I'll tell you how that came
please
about.
Tell me.
Is when I was 26 years old,
right?
I started having dreams with master teachers, and I would just feel this unconditional love. Nothing was said; everything was conveyed through feelings, right? And I would just wake up in bliss and just wonder who they were. There were three beings, and that went on for quite some time, and then for several months, and then that would happen.
You saw them physically in your room?
No, in dream states.
I see, gotcha.
In dream states, and then the second part of it, then I would wake up inside the lucid dream and realize that my soul was actually there with them.
That's crazy.
And they would still convey through feelings. And that went on for a couple of months. And then the third part came when those two things happened, and then I would open my eyes and I would see their astral forms at the foot of my bed. And I was like, oh, I have to pay attention to this. And I never felt fear. I never felt anything. I didn't really understand at that time what was happening. And so I started to just journal all my experiences, and my spirituality was quickening at alarming rates.
Right.
Like I couldn't gobble things up fast enough, and just elevating and elevating and elevating. And so when I finished writing this book about the experiences, which was 400 pages, one of those master teachers came to me and said, "What would you say if I told you just wrote that book for yourself?" And I said, "Wow, then I learned a lot." He said, "Now it's time to sit down and write the real book." And from the minute I sat down, I could see their energies coming. I had 3 portals in my apartment at that time, and I would see the energies coming down, and then they would move around me. And in those first like many months, my body would just ring with chills with their energy around me. And they just said, you just write and write and write until you can't write anymore. Don't stop, don't edit, just write. And so the experience.
So your ego didn't kick. They didn't want your ego to be a part of it.
Nothing. And that's why, when we were talking earlier, they wake me up at 3 o'clock every morning to write, and that's still a part of what I do. Still wake up at 3 o'clock, and I have to go write because they like it, because the brain waves are nil, right, at that time, because mostly everybody's sleeping. So then as I started to write, I started getting Tehran, who's the lead character in all these books. I would feel him then put his feeling body inside my body, and I would feel who he was. And then, of course, I would sob and cry because you're actually experiencing their soul. That's another part of telepathic communication that a lot of people don't understand, that when a telepathic thought or something is conveyed, that actually the feeling and the experience of that experiencer now become a part of your experience, because you're just not hearing it, you're actually feeling it as they felt it. So I was having these experiences with these master teachers as well, and writing from that perspective. So the whole first book turned out to be 900 pages.
Oh my!
Right, and
gosh.
And then what I ended up doing was then cutting it down and making the first book, I Am Tehran, and then I cut it down even more and made the second book, Waking Tehran, and that kind of thing. So, but really, a lot of people don't know what duality is, right? They're like, well, what is that? What is duality? And really, it's just our opposing nature that is helping us to quicken our equilibrium, our soul, so that we can then start working from the heart base. Right. So with every experience that we have, so we have to get back to the basics of thought. So we all think a thought, right? And then we say, well, I'm going to think on that thought. Should I do this or should I not do this? Whether it's an anger over someone else and you want vindictiveness, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get them back. So then if you create that thought and you do that vindictiveness, then you have started to create a whole karmic pattern that is going to continue and continue and continue, because you're just growing anger, fear, and hatred. But if you say, I'm going to take the high road, I'm just going to sit, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to just take time away from this person, and when I'm feeling in the proper perspective, maybe we can sit down, we can talk about it. And when you start to do that, then your whole inward self starts to shift and to change, and it happens little by little by little. But then you get to this incredible point where nothing really bothers you anymore, because you know that you can handle it, and you know that you can you know the allotted time that maybe that other person might need before you have a conversation with them.
I mean, this is you're taking really a fiction book,
right,
as we said, and really making it more of even not just a paranormal, but also spirituality.
It is. It's very spiritual, and there's
because if you really get the gist of what you're saying,
right, it's all those contexts. So, strangely enough, Tehran, who is born into a fully conscious society, is actually born dualistic. So they have an anomaly about every 200,000 people born in cosmic society is born dualistic, and this is so that they have reference to duality. And so we actually go on Tehran's journey of how he overcomes his own duality. So we all become the main character, and we see some of the in-depth things that he had to go through to quicken himself and obtain being fully conscious, and then how he then interacts with everybody after being fully conscious.
Right.
So,
and the latest book was just released a little over a month ago.
Yes. Yeah.
And just because, I mean, it's every time I look, I was like, was that the same book? And like, it's another book, and I'm like, so apparently are you still having the dreams, or are you?
I'm
just the inspiration.
I'm at a point where I no longer need the dreams.
Right.
I just connect.
Okay.
And when I write, I connect with whoever it is that I'm writing about. And they come into my feeling body. Like book 3 is a real amazing book because it's about the universal duality,
right?
And it's what happens in there, and the two lead characters, what goes on there, is so deep and so intense. I cried every time I wrote,
really
sobbed, and everybody has that same experience reading it because you just connect with it on a deeper level. And then book 4 is called The Huroid Revolution and Other Warring Creatures. So the Huroids actually came about. We meet them in book 1, and they're throughout the whole 4-book series. Theirs is an interesting thing. Their planet was a warring planet, similar to ours. All the greed, all the governmental greed, racism, everything, and then other beings from elsewhere interacting secretly with the government, and how they're all manipulating each other. And so in the end, their planet was destroyed. So there were all these souls that were on this world, and they had many meetings about it because they could continue their evolution in the spirit world, but most of them wanted to continue their evolution in a physical body.
Right.
Because you can quicken yourself to learn more in physicality because you're experiencing more. And believe me, even when you're fully conscious, you still have to deal with everything.
Right.
You're just more aware of really how to deal with
not doing a reaction.
Doing a reaction to it. So what they came up with is, if these souls wanted to, they made synthetic bodies for them to come into, and then they work alongside commanders and things, and so they're called Huroids. So they're not fully conscious, but they're dualistic in nature, so they could still learn from a dualistic thing and still climb the ladder of ascension.
Wow.
Right?
Right.
So anyway, what ends up happening in book 4 is that they start revolting. Right. But it's not what you think. And I thought it was going to be like the regular revolt, but it's not even that. It's something completely different. So that's what's exciting for me writing it, because I get to read it first. Right. That's what's really fun. Because I have no idea what's going to come out.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I give anybody kudos that actually can just write, a pamphlet, let alone a book. And
it sounds to me like there's going to be a 5.
Yes, there will be a 5. There'll be 7 books total. And I think the next book is actually going to be a prequel.
Really?
And then I'll come back and I'll do 2 additional to make it 7.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't get to choose. I just hear, and when they start putting...
So they still communicate with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're putting that story in me
Right.
now already, so I'm making notes.
Have you ever said, just be quiet, I want to sleep? No?
You can't. You just can't, believe me.
Yeah.
It's annoying. It's annoying that won't go away.
Oh, I thought you said annoying, but it's
no,
annoying.
Annoying,
okay.
like...
And I'm sure it's annoying.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be like, are you kidding me?
No, I'm just in the flow of it now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love every minute of it.
Right.
I worked with a wonderful artist to create all these magnificent beings.
Yeah, I'm showing it right now.
Paradise
It's beautiful.
suns, created beings, fully conscious beings, everything that goes along with it, and creating some of the stuff inside there.
Is that Tony Sweet on the cover of this one?
It is.
Yeah,
That's Tony right there.
When I was
blonde hair.
Yeah, 16, and I had very long hair. Yeah, and living in the woods.
That's right. That's right. Oh, and by the way, audio book for book 1 and book 2 are now on Amazon Audible.
That is. Did you do it?
I didn't do it. I hired narrators to do it, and they did a fantastic job. And I'll be starting book 3 on in next month.
That's great.
As well. So
that would be more my style. I like to hear more audiobooks.
A lot of people love that. And I didn't realize, I mean, they went like wildfire. You know, the minute
people are
they came
ADD
out.
more nowadays than they were ever had.
I found when I was younger, I could read, and now when I read, I go to sleep after 2 pages.
Yeah, me
right? Don't
too.
you see? Right?
Me too.
I'm with you, man. That's
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So everybody's like, I want Audible. I want Audible.
But I can do Audible in the car where I'm doing this, and I'm still taking it in.
Yeah, absolutely. But people can look at some of the artwork and some of the stuff on the website, autobiography of unanet.com.
Yeah, we got it up here. Yep,
you do.
great.
Beautiful. And there's a super fan special if anybody wants to buy all 4 books, or they can buy individual books. I'll be happy to personalize them.
That's great.
Them,
That's great.
All that good stuff. So.
Now, I mean, with being the connection through divine or, spirit or whatever you want to call the beings,
yes.
Do you feel that your own intuition or intuitive has enhanced over the years?
Yeah.
I mean, just listening to you, I can tell. And
immensely. I mean, immensely. A perk from this is when I see people, I feel who they are in their soul. And I know if they've had past trauma. This actually helps me when I'm casting, because
I was going to say, as a casting director,
when I meet an actor, I'm like, ooh, they've experienced this either in this life or another life. And then they do this mind-blowing reading where they connected. And so that's an absolutely wonderful perk to to doing casting. So
that's great.
But and a lot of times you just see the love and everything that's inside them, or if somebody needs a really good hug.
Captain Ron does every time I see him.
Right.
Hug me.
What can I say, Tony?
I give
I'm
good
a hugger.
hugs. Yeah,
I'm a hugger. And if somebody squirms, I'll hug them tighter.
That's right. Yeah, he just drops his hands below the waist. I don't really appreciate that, though. Well, before we get out of here, so people, again, where can people find the books?
Autobiography of unanet.com. And we're on everything. The Instagram's at Tehran Books. And we're on Facebook as well.
Perfect.
And they can get them on Audible, the first 2 books again. And Stranger at the Pentagon is just strangeratthePentagon.com. And my casting website's CraigCampobasso.com.
Perfect. And I have a feeling that one of these years you're going to see these books on
like this, right?
Well, as a feature films.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
sure.
as a series, and then hopefully Stranger at the Pentagon. Definitely.
Yeah, we're working on that right now. We've got everything ready to go for the feature, so we're just talking to financiers and all of them. Believe me, it will be mind blowing. We're going to see visuals and things we've never seen in any motion picture before, because we're going to go on motherships, starships, and Victor 1 class saucers. Right.
Maybe Valiant will come out and to the premiere. Wouldn't that be nice? That would be kind of nice.
I looked when we did our premiere.
Did you really? You were looking.
I was like, I need to photograph the audience and see if anybody looks out of place.
He goes, "That's me."
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate Craig for being here. We appreciate you guys for listening and tuning in. Every Friday, we try to put out new shows for you guys. Go to truthbetoldworldwide.com. Check out all our upcoming guests. And please subscribe and leave comments on our YouTube channel. Just type in Truth Be Told. Is it TV or radio? I can't remember. Radio. There we go. Yeah, you one or the other. It'll come up. But we appreciate you. Ron, when are you going to be back in studio?
Next Friday.
There we go. Finally. Well, wear that pretty dress that I like. So until then, we'll see you next time. Craig, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.